Edward Burkhardt made the comments during a visit to Lac-Megantic. He said that he no longer believed the engineer had put the brakes on, as he originally stated. Well, let's cross live now to Quebec, and on the line joining me is the BBC's David Willis. And David, hearing there from Edward Burkhardt, blame very much being laid on an engineer of the rail company. Thank you very much for that, David there from Quebec. The man accused of bombing the Boston Marathon along with his brother has pleaded not guilty to all charges, including using a weapon of mass destruction. Joko Zanayev spoke in a Boston court in his first public appearance since the attack, which killed 3 people and injured more than 260 others in April. Katie Watson reports. Katie Watson reports in Washington. Now, pressure on Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood, Rico.
You're watching Newsday on the BBC, live from Singapore and London. Still to come on the program, a hero
proving to be big in the business world. Let's catch up on the day's news from here in the UK for you now. And union leaders have accused the government.
This is Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
And Babita Sharma in London. The headlines. The Irish Parliament has delayed a vote on controversial new abortion legislation into the early hours of this morning. The government says the bill will simply give clarity to existing laws, but the Catholic Church believes the legislation will lead to abortions where a mother's life is not at immediate risk. Our Ireland correspondent Chris Bucklow explores the issues in this report from Dublin.
BBC News, Dublin.
In other news, the President of Portugal has approved a reshuffle.
Japan News, Chengdu.
You've been watching Newsday from Rico and myself. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you again soon. Goodbye. American whistleblower Edward Snowden remains a mystery. But when he does resurface, he'll have to look for a new job. The company which hired him to work as a convict. Washington correspondent David Willis gave us the latest on the White House's reaction.
Live from Singapore and London. Still to come on the program, anger.
Let's catch up with the day's news from across the UK for you now in the GCSE system in England.
I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Babita Sharma in London. Let's bring you up to date the headlines. The Argentine Football Association has banned away fans from attending football matches after the death of a supporter. The ban will apply across the country in all divisions of Argentine football. The fan who died killed in Ireland, and he joins me now. Ignacio, just bring us up to date with the background into why this decision has been made.
Well, you've been watching Newsday from the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
I'm Babita Sharma in London. Before we go, let's take you back to the scene in Taksim Square in Istanbul. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye. You're watching BBC News. I'm Babita Sharma. The latest headlines this hour. For you here on BBC News. Now, the Financial Conduct Authority has expressed serious concerns about the way banks are handling complaints about the mis-selling of payment protection insurance. Lloyds Banking Group has admitted to shortcomings at one of its centres dealing with compensation claims. An undercover investigation by the Times newspaper found evidence that workers were told to ignore possible fraud by the bank's sales staff. Our business editor Robert Peston reports.
Hello and welcome to Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
I'm Babita Sharma in London. The headlines.
It's 8 in the morning in Singapore.
1 in the morning here in London. We're broadcasting to viewers around the world. Welcome to Newsday. Hello again and welcome to the programme. Huge crowds of supporters of the ousted Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi are spending another night on the streets of Cairo, close to where more than 50 of their comrades were killed during clashes with soldiers. Well, the authorities have set up a judicial committee to investigate the killings, which the Muslim Brotherhood called a massacre. The military said that it was acting in self-defense. A couple of hours ago, Egypt's interim government set a timetable for parliamentary elections to be held by 2014. From Cairo, here's Quentin Somerville. Quinton Somerville reporting there. Well, the White House says it's still reviewing whether the actions of the Egyptian military amount to a coup, which under US law would automatically block the sending of aid. Our diplomatic correspondent Bridget Kendall considers the increasingly complex challenge facing Egypt's caretaker government. In Turkey, police have fired tear gas and water cannon protesters who tried to defy a closure order and enter an Istanbul park at the centre of protests against Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan's government. Gezi Park. Safety of garment factories under the spotlight again, Rico. What are the details? Now to the United States, where it's emerged that the pilot of the Asiana plane that crashed at San Francisco Airport on Saturday had never landed a Boeing 777 there before. Investigators say the plane was flying significantly below its target speed on approach, and the pilots had to try to abort the landing just seconds before it crashed. 2 passengers were killed and dozens were injured. Johnny Diamond has the latest. Canadian police say they have now recovered 13 bodies from the town of Lac-Mégantic in Quebec, where a runaway fuel train exploded in the early hours of Saturday. Officials...
Watching Newsday on the BBC, live from Singapore and London. Still to come in the programme.
The Labour leader Ed Miliband is to propose a major change to the party's relationship with the trade unions in the wake of a bitter row with Unite over the selection of a parliamentary candidate in Falkirk. Mr. Miliband...
This is Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Babita Sharma in London. Let's keep you up to date now with the headlines this hour. Bolivia has summoned the ambassadors of France, Spain, Portugal and Italy to explain why their countries blocked a plane carrying President Evo Morales last week. The plane was forced to reroute and land in Austria amid rumours that US fugitive Edward Snowden was on board. Well, the incident has sparked anger and protests in the country's capital. Katerina Moe has the details.
Intended to intimidate.
Tennis, and Andy Murray has continued his victory lap after winning Wimbledon, of course. David Cameron then, let's see if Andy Murray becomes Sir Murray. That's it from Rico and me. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon. Goodbye. Hello there, you're watching BBC News with me, Babita Sharma. The latest headlines for you this hour. The government's publishing a new curriculum for 5 to 14-year-olds in England, which the Prime Minister describes as a revolution in education. The changes will take effect from September next year, but unions say that's too soon. The revisions mean a greater focus on grammar and science, with more challenging maths. Our education correspondent Rita Chakrabarti has the details. Severe flooding has killed at least 3 people in Western Canada and forced hundreds of thousands to abandon their homes. The central business district of Calgary has been evacuated, and the authorities say the worst is not over yet.
This is what happens after 36 hours of...
People living in the US state of Idaho have been keeping a close eye on the news that America wants to hold direct peace talks with the Taliban. Idaho is home to the only American prisoner of war still being held captive in Afghanistan. Bo Bergdahl was captured 4 years ago, and his fate could hinge on the possibility of a prisoner exchange. Here's our North America correspondent, Ben Wright. Music that hasn't been heard in Cuba for more than 2 centuries is being performed by a choir and orchestra in Havana this week.
Fitting in to Newsday, I'm Sharon Lael in Singapore.
I'm Babita Sharma in London. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you soon. Hello there, you're watching BBC News. I'm Babita Sharma. The headlines for you this hour. Responsibility. Adnan Nawaz is here with the rest of the day's news for you in just under half an hour's time. But here on BBC News, it's time for the bottom line with Evan Davis. See you soon.
Newsday on the BBC Live from Singapore and London. Still to come on the programme. Anger at...
Now for some news from across the UK for you in the English Defence League. Sharonjit Lail in Singapore, Babita Sharma in London. Thank you for being with us. The headlines for you this hour. Turkey's Deputy Prime Minister has met a group of anti-government protesters in a bid to end 6 days of demonstrations. The group laid out a series of demands, including the removal of the city's governor and a halt to the development of a park in Istanbul. But there's no word yet, though, of any compromise. From Turkey, here's Mark Lewis.
This is, at the very least, Istanbul.
Michael Jackson's teenage daughter Paris is in hospital in California after apparently trying to take her own life. The spokesperson for the family says the 15-year-old is physically fine and that she's still receiving medical attention. A little earlier I spoke to BBC's Peter Bose, who gave us the latest on Paris Jackson's condition from LA. So the family, and in particular the children of Michael Jackson, getting, because Paris is quite prolific on Twitter, isn't she? She hasn't necessarily been much out of the public eye since her father's death. Babita Sharma in London. A reminder of our main news again this hour. An opposition creative with access to the town where our chief international correspondent Lucy says the town is in ruins. That's our top story. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon. Let's catch up with some news stories from around the UK for you now. Downing Street has promised to table legislation.
This is Newsday on the BBC. I'm Richard John in Singapore.
And Babita Sharma in London. Thank you for joining us. Let's bring you up to date with the headlines this hour. Online dating is an increasingly common way of finding long-term love, according to a new study. The research carried out by the University of Chicago and commissioned by the dating website eHarmony reported that most couples are between 30 and 49 and had higher than average incomes. Warren is the founder of eHarmony.com and he joins me now via webcam from New York. Doctor, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Babita. It's nice to be with you.
Tell me that is moving when we look to relationships and marriage. We're quite stunned by the fact that this survey only really interviewed 20,000 people over a period of 7 years, and it was actually commissioned by eHarmony. Some would kind of raise a big question mark here about the vested interest in the results.
Well, you know now.
But thank you so much for talking us through that, Dr. Neil Clark Warren. You've been watching Newsday. From me, Enrico, thanks for joining. Hello, you're watching BBC News with me, Babita Sharma. The headlines. There's been two men accused of murdering drummer Lee Rigby in Woolwich have made separate court appearances. Michael Adebayo and Michael Adebowale were both remanded in custody. The Prime Minister has announced that a task force to tackle radical extremism, which met for the first time on Monday, is to meet on a monthly basis. As our correspondent Tom Simons reports. The future Labour government would stop winter fuel payments to wealthy pensioners. The Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls said it was a sign of Labour's iron discipline in its approach to the public finances. But some of his Labour colleagues have expressed concern that the party's traditional commitment to universal benefits was being undermined. Our political editor Nick Robinson reports. The acting head of the tax agency. He's the acting head of the tax agency RICO in America. His name is Stephen Miller. And President Obama announced that he has resigned, Stephen Miller, of course, in a scandal involving the targeting of conservative groups by the tax authorities. Now, this investigation found that these groups, like the Tea Party, were improperly targeted for scrutiny by the IRS agency when they applied for tax-exempt status. Well, Mr. Obama said what happened was inexcusable. With the very latest, we can speak to the research very closely in the last few hours or so. This is a scandal, many are saying, that's rocking the very top of the Obama administration. I mean, President Obama has moved in very quickly here to condemn the actions of the IRS.
Go away.
Yeah, indeed, it'll be interesting to see how the conservative groups react to that. But also, a sidebar, but perhaps just as important, David, in the last hour or so, we understand that the Obama administration have taken an unusual step, many are saying, to release some 100-page emails related to the U.S. Thank you so much for that. David Willis there, reporting from Washington. Now, the United Nations General Assembly has adopted a resolution calling for a political transition in Syria. Let's take you to Nigeria now, where government troops have begun arriving in 3 northeastern states. They'll take up the fight against Islamist militant groups there. The region is currently under a state of emergency, which was declared on Tuesday in response to attacks by the Islamist group Boko Haram. Our Africa correspondent Will Ross has the latest.
You're watching Newsday on the BBC, live from Singapore and London. Still to come on the program, we'll have more.
News from the UK for you now, and we begin with senior Conservatives today who are...
This is Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Babita Sharma in London. The headlines for you this hour.
And good dash, but it's also going to...
Now, Vladimir Lenin's body is back on view to the public after the first major renovation of his mausoleum in Moscow's Red Square. The communist leader's body was embalmed after he died in 1924, and for decades, Russian citizens and foreign tourists alike have been able to file around the glass case where Lenin lies to see him for themselves. With all the details, here's our Moscow correspondent, Daniel Sanford. Well, staying in Russia, take a look at these. Pictures have emerged of a dramatic lightning strike on a television tower in St. Petersburg on Monday night. The head of the broadcasting service said it was thrown off air for a few minutes after the strike. The tower is located at the highest point in the city and has been hit before when electrical storms passed through. Incredible pictures there.
Thanks for watching Newsday. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
I'm Babita Sharma in London.
Thanks for watching Newsday. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
I'm Babita Sharma in London. See you soon.
Hello everyone, glad you could join us for this edition of Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
I'm Babita Sharma in London. The headlines. Midnight here in London.
7 in the morning here in Singapore on Wednesday, the 8th of July, broadcasting to viewers around the world. You're watching Newsday. Within the last few hours, Eurozone leaders have issued a stark final warning to Greece, giving the country until Thursday to present a new plan to deal with the country's debt crisis or face leaving the Eurozone. If a workable plan emerges, it will be put to an emergency meeting of all EU leaders.
A short time ago, I spoke to the editor for the BBC's Newsnight programme, Duncan Wilden, and I put to him the statements haven't had much room for interpretation for the Greek recipients.
No.
Talk about that escalation, because the Eurozone finance ministers, that, you know, they were very frustrated on Tuesday because they were expecting Greece to come up with a proposal. They didn't. So they're almost saying to them, you can't do that with us. We're being very serious here. And you're saying, well, maybe tomorrow, maybe Thursday, maybe at the end of the week. How is your reading of the situation between the two?
Meeting taking place in Washington now.
Liverpool there in Washington. Events have been held across London to remember one of the deadliest terror attacks on British soil. It was 10 years ago, on the 7th of July 2005, that 3 bombs went off in quick succession on board underground trains across the city. A short time later, a 4th was detonated on a bus in central London. In all, 52 people died and more than 700 were injured. Our special correspondent Fergal Keane has been following the day's events.
Live from Singapore and London, still to come on the program. This is Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Babita Sharma in London. Let's bring you up to date with the headlines this hour. Eurozone leaders. The Malaysian task force has frozen 6 bank accounts following allegations that Prime Minister Najib Razak received nearly $700 million in public funds. However, it did not reveal the identities of the account holders. Meanwhile, Malaysia's former leader, Mahathir Mohamad, has called on the Prime Minister Najib to show public proof that his assets are legal. Speaking to the BBC, Mr. Mahathir accused the Prime Minister of having what he called a lavish lifestyle, which has been closely scrutinised in the local press. We asked the Prime Minister's office to respond to Mr. Mahathir's comments on these allegations, but they declined. However, Prime Minister Najib has previously issued a statement on the social networking site Facebook, saying that the various allegations made against him are unsubstantiated and outrageous. This is what he said. Well, the BBC's Jennifer Pack sat down with Prime Minister Najib's former mentor and now fiercest critic, Mr. Mahathir, and began by telling him the State Fund has denied giving any money to Prime Minister Najib.
after she said players should, quote, go back to where their parents came from, unquote. They cannot behave. Well,
That's too good. That's too good. I did move. I did move.
Well, it was in response to Kyrgios's bad behaviour that former Olympic swimmer Dawn Fraser and Australian sporting legend made these remarks, also aimed at fellow player Bernard Tomic.
They should be sitting in a bit of...
Australian sports reporter Patrick Galloway from ABC Television explained the situation for us.
For the headlines next Tuesday.
Hello there, you're watching BBC News. I'm Babita Sharma. The headlines this hour. More Newsday coming up for you in half an hour's time, but now on BBC News, it's time for Hard Talk. Just catch up with some of the day's other news for you now, and a Birmingham head team.
You're watching Newsday on the BBC. I'm Sharon Duke-Lale in Singapore.
And Babita Sharma in London. The headlines this hour.
Well, if you live in Asia like me, you'll know all about the durian, the so-called king of fruits. It's loved and loathed in equal measure. Of course, it's the smell that many people object to, while others laud the taste.
Well, it is big business. 23,000 tonnes of the fruit were imported by Singapore last year alone. And some varieties, the best, can cost up to $30 a kilogram.
And so, of course, we gave you, Babita, the task of finding out what the fuss was all about.
Yeah, thanks for that. The biggest area of Singapore here, lots of different market stalls. This is one of the main ones selling the fruit that we're talking about, of course, durians. And I can just go here, and I'm really pleased to see him. Good to see you. You've been on this market stall for 2 years. What is it about?
Durian very smell, but you try different. You try very best. You smell cannot.
Durian still
Not too bad.
an acquired taste, but I've got to give it a go. So here goes. Wow, that is strong. I've never tasted anything like that. Incredible. Kind of overriding garlic taste. But I have to say, there's something about it that's a little bit moreish. Industry is worth an estimate in fruit for decades, and his
From Germany,
with demand and trade in the fruit increasing across BBC News.
Babita, I just loved your expression when you first tried the durian. I mean, what were you really thinking?
Do you know, just watching that is reminding me about how it is so distinctive. I'm not a durian lover, I'm afraid, but I think you are, aren't you, Sharon?
Well, actually, you know what, I'm Singaporean, I grew up with it. I don't dislike it, but I don't particularly like it either, and I actually haven't had it for about, I don't know, about a decade now. So
Yeah.
it was really something my parents liked. It's an older generation thing.
Yeah, I know that people in Singapore have divided opinions, but the people we met absolutely loved it, but I'm going to let you enjoy it.
And that's right, the smell, of course, means it's banned off public transport, and even in shopping malls, you can't bring it in there. But moving on now. The legendary American, just an amazing lady, may she rest in peace. You've been watching Newsday from the BBC. I'm Sharon Duke-Lale in Singapore.
I'm Babita Sharma in London. Thank you for joining us. We're back with the headlines next. For views in Asia, stay tuned for Asia Business Report. We'll see you soon.
Saturday morning.
Hello there, you're watching BBC News with me, Babita Sharma. The headlines. President Obama. Now, after a week of election disappointment and criticisms of their leader, the Liberal Democrats are facing further controversy. Lord Oakeshott, a senior peer, has quit the party, saying it's heading for disaster under Nick Clegg. The peer is a close friend of the business secretary, Vince Cable, and was facing disciplinary action for commissioning opinion polls on Mr. Clegg's leadership. Our political correspondent, Alex Forsyth, reports.
And those are the markets at this hour.
Okay, Rico, more coming up from you with the Asia Business Report a little later on. Now, the Secretary-General of NATO has reacted strongly to the refusal of Afghan President Hamid Karzai to sign a security agreement with the United States. In an interview with the BBC's Newsnight programme, Anders Fogh Rasmussen expressed frustration at recent comments made by Mr. Karzai, criticising aspects of the NATO-led mission. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
Sometimes.
Anders Fogh Rasmussen there. Well, with me is Ali Aryan from the BBC's Afghan service. Good to see you, Ali. Is there a sense that patience is running out now with Mr. Karzai and his kind of political manoeuvring regarding this issue? Malcolm Moore, the chief editor of the Asia-Pacific Journal of Cancer Prevention. Now, a painting bought for £100,000 over 20 years ago should be destroyed, according to French art experts, because it's a fake. A British collector, Martin Lang, believed he'd bought an original work by the Russian-born artist Marc Chagall. But the authorities in Paris say that under French law, it should be destroyed. Our arts editor, Will Gompert, has the details.
Here is the controversial painting. Signed Chagall, dated 1909-19...
You're watching Newsday on the BBC, live from Singapore and London. Still to come on the program is
Back up with some news from across the UK for you now. And the education...
This is Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
I'm Babita Sharma in London. The headlines.
Gets underway on Friday in the Russian Black Sea resort of Sochi, but with just days to go, some of the hotels still aren't ready to host the world's media.
Yeah, there are also other problems. There's been controversy over Russia's so-called anti-gay propaganda law. And as Daniel Sanford now reports, there are also concerns about security at the Olympic Park.
Sochi.
Well, as those security preparations continue, the Olympic flame is on its journey to Sochi. The torches...
Let's now take a look at how some other news organizations are reporting the world at this hour. And
you've been watching Newsday here on the BBC from Rico Hizon and myself. Thank you very much for joining us. And just a quick reminder of our main news. Stocks have tumbled in Wall Street. They're also showing negative on the Asian markets as well. More on that to come. But in the meantime, thanks for joining us. See you soon. Hello there, you're watching BBC News with me, Babita Sharma. The headlines for you this hour. The Education Secretary, Michael Gove, has been setting out his vision for the future of England's state schools, breaking down what he called the Berlin Wall between state and private sectors. He suggested longer school days with time for more after-school activities. There should be an emphasis on tougher discipline and more testing, especially at the age of 13. But teachers' unions and opposition MPs were unimpressed, as our education correspondent Rita Chakrabarti reports.
hello and welcome to Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
I'm Babita Sharma in London. The headlines.
It's 8 in the morning in Singapore.
1 in the morning here in London. We're broadcasting to viewers around the world. Welcome to Newsday. Hello again and welcome to the programme. Huge crowds of supporters of the ousted Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi are spending another night on the streets of Cairo, close to where more than 50 of their comrades were killed during clashes with soldiers. Well, the authorities have set up a judicial committee to investigate the killings, which the Muslim Brotherhood called a massacre. The military says it was acting in self-defense. A couple of hours ago, Egypt's interim government set a timetable for parliamentary elections to be held by 2014. From Cairo, here's Quentin Somerville. Quentin Somerville reporting there. Well, the White House says it's still reviewing whether the actions of the Egyptian military amount to a coup, which under US law would automatically block the sending of aid. Our diplomatic correspondent Bridget Kendall considers the increasingly complex challenge facing Egypt's caretaker government. In Turkey, police have fired tear gas and water cannon at protesters who tried to defy a closure order and enter an Istanbul park at the centre of protests against Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan's government. Gezi Park. Safety of garment factories under the spotlight again, Rico. What are the details? Now to the United States, where it's emerged that the pilot of the Asiana plane that crashed at San Francisco Airport on Saturday had never landed a Boeing 777 there before. Investigators say the plane was flying significantly below its target speed on approach, and the pilots had to try to abort the landing just seconds before it crashed. 2 passengers were killed and dozens were injured. Johnny Diamond has the latest. Canadian police say they have now recovered 13 bodies from the town of Lac-Mégantic in Quebec, where a runaway fuel train exploded in the early hours of Saturday. Officials
Watching Newsday on the BBC, live from Singapore and London. Still to come in the programme.
The Labour leader Ed Miliband is to propose a major change to the party's relationship with the trade unions in the wake of a bitter row with Unite over the selection of a parliamentary candidate in Falkirk. Mr. Miliband.
This is Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Babita Sharma in London. Let's keep you up to date now with the headlines this hour. Bolivia has summoned the ambassadors of France, Spain, Portugal and Italy to explain why their countries blocked a plane carrying President Evo Morales last week. The plane was forced to reroute and land in Austria amid rumours that US fugitive Edward Snowden was on board. Well, the incident has sparked anger and protests in the country's capital. Katerina Moe has the details.
Intended to intimidate.
Tennis, and Andy Murray has continued his victory lap after winning Wimbledon, of course. David Cameron then, let's see if Andy Murray becomes Sir Murray. That's it from Rico and me. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon. Goodbye. Hello there, you're watching BBC News with me, Babita Sharma. The latest headlines for you this hour. The government's publishing a new curriculum for 5 to 14-year-olds in England, which the Prime Minister describes as a revolution in education. The changes will take effect from September next year, but unions say that's too soon. The revisions mean a greater focus on grammar and science, with more challenging maths. Higher education correspondent Rita Chakrabarti has the details.
Starts trading on Monday. Seen a mixed reaction. Is trending at bbc.com this hour. Here with us, plenty more on the BBC website. The top story here in the UK. Junior doctors in England are set to go on strike. Here's Rico now on Asia Business Report. Presidential candidate Sarah Palin has endorsed Donald Trump for the Republican nomination in this year's race for the presidency. This video is on bbc.com this hour. Of the iconic Rit host. More from me in 10 minutes, but first, here's Asia Business Report with Rico Hizon. To bring some news that's coming to us from Turkey, I understand the media there are reporting that at least 22 people have been injured in a blast at the police headquarters, near police headquarters in the southeast of Turkey. More on that to come as soon as we get it. Now, let's just go back to our top story and that gigantic jackpot that's on offer in America in the Powerball lottery, $1.5 billion. For a closer look at some of the numbers involved, let's speak to Victor Matheson, an economist at the College of the bought a lottery ticket before. So what does that do to the mechanics of how the odds for people that are playing this every day?
Yeah.
Picture. John F. Kennedy, Winston Churchill and Queen Elizabeth have long been regarded as key icons of the 20th century. But what gives them this unique status? Some may say it's the power of their image and what they've come to represent. But a Singapore-based artist is trying to challenge that by using the power of words. This is his story. You're watching BBC World News. I'm Babita Sharma. Our top story, lottery fever is in full swing in America with the world's biggest ever jackpot up for grabs. American is trending at bbc.com this hour. South Korean force and all those stories on the BBC News website. Stay with us here on BBC World News. And here in the UK, police have revealed that the serial child killer Robert Black, who died in prison on Tuesday. More from me later. Here's Rico with Asia Business Report. I'm Babita Sharma in London. How this London. The Governor of California has declared a state of emergency in response to a methane gas leak that began more than 2 months ago. The leak is the worst of its kind in the state's history. It is turning an affluent suburb into a ghost town. Matt Danzico went to Porter Ranch to visit a community that may not return to normal for many months. Let's get more now on our top story, the situation in North Korea and those claims they successfully tested a hydrogen bomb. A little earlier I spoke to Jeffrey Lewis, who is the director of the East Asia Non-Proliferation Program at the Monterey Institute of International Studies in California. He explained what evidence there is that North Korea did set off that bomb.
It's a
What does this mean then? How significant is this if it's proven to be the case that it is a hydrogen bomb compared to the nuclear tests that North Korea carried out beforehand? Well, the BBC's Marika Oy is in Seoul and gave us this update a short time ago. Feeling there among the region in Asia, because we know that China proposed the test and everybody else. I'm sorry about that, we seem to be having some technical difficulties there, but we'll try and reinstate the report for you. Now, moving on to other news. Photographs have been released of Prince George on his first day at nursery. Guys, we're having a few technical difficulties here, but I'm hoping we're going to be able to bring you our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell's report. Let's hope so, fingers crossed. Now, it's the only time of the year when people hope what happens in Vegas doesn't stay there. With more details, here's our technology correspondent, Rory Kesslin-Jones. Hi there, you're watching BBC World News. I'm Babita Sharma. Our top story, North Korea's claim that it's tested its first hydrogen bomb has been met with unanimous. This is the video that's trending at bbc.com this hour. Date, of course, plenty more of the stories on the BBC News website. We'll see you soon. And our top story here in the UK, 3 front bench MPs have resigned. Back with later, but here's Rico with Asia Business Report. Malcolm Turnbull means for Australia politics coming up a little later on. Our other top story this hour is more on the refugee crisis in Europe. Police in Hungary have sealed a key border crossing used by people entering the European Union from Serbia. New laws taken into effect in Hungary on Tuesday that enable hundreds of officers deployed along the border to arrest and charge those who breach the new fence. Government spokesman Zoltán Kovács said on Monday that he had seen a record number of migrants trying to enter Hungary, almost 10,000. France's President Hollande says airstrikes against Islamic State militants will be necessary in Syria. He claimed that without airstrikes, the conflict, which is now in its 5th year, would just continue. So far, an estimated 200,000 people have been killed, and more than half the population of Syria is homeless. Around 7.5 million are thought to be displaced within the country. Our Middle East editor, Jeremy Bone, is in Damascus. He's been to the front line in Jobar, where government and rebel positions are just 100 metres apart. He sent this special report in a warning. It does contain some distressing images. Also coming up on the programme, we'll use Marine Corps facility, but the Mount Aso volcano eruption is their front page picture story this morning. Tourists are being told to stay away, and you can clearly see why those plumes of ash there coming out of the volcano. And here in Britain, the actress Nicole Kidman makes it onto the front page of The Times. She's due to appear in London, returning to the stage to appear in a play called Photograph 51, which is about Rosalind Franklin, who played a key role in uncovering the structure of DNA. So that's the way the papers are looking this morning. But Sharonjit, it is the ousting of Tony Abbott that's got a bit of a response, quite a bit in fact, on social media. Well, let's stay with that and Australia's new Prime Minister. It is what a lot of people are talking about this hour. We can head to Canberra now and speak to Latika Burke, the national political reporter for the Sydney Morning Herald. Good morning to you, Latika. Welcome to the programme. Tell us on it.
Yes, this is our 5th.
Really going to have the consensus that you just described, because he is he not, at odds with a lot of members in the coalition there, particularly when it comes to issues like climate change and gay marriage. I mean, he could be seen as a divisive figure for the party. I mean, come on, he wasn't really expecting this, was he? Are we a few hours away from him being sworn in? We're going to look at it very closely. Latika, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time. I'm sure we'll speak again. Now, could a robot take your job, or mine? In the second report in our series on artificial intelligence, we've been looking into new research from the UK that... And what camera am I on, lovely director? Thank you very much. Stay with us here on BBC World News. We've got the headlines for you coming up a little later on. And as Sharon just said, she's back here with all the business news on Asia Business Report, and of course a closer look at how the markets are doing, opening up this morning. And we'll have more continuing coverage of the news that Malcolm Turnbull has been sworn in, will be sworn in, as Australia's Prime Minister in the next few hours from now. Stay with us for that. You're watching BBC World News. I'm Babita Sharma. Our top story, Malcolm Turnbull is to be sworn in as Australia's new Prime Minister. This is a video that's trending at bbc.com this hour. Officials in California say 23,000 people have been driven. Stay with us here on BBC World News. And the top story for you here in the UK, Jeremy Corbyn has a business report.
John Donaldson reporting there. Now, violence has broken out on the Greek Isle of Kos as the ongoing migrant crisis pushed refugees and locals to the limit. The trouble started over a struggle for registration papers. They are key to a life in Europe. Coming up on the programme for you. Behind-the-scenes photographs from Charles...
Well, Babita, apart from the clapping, I've also learned from you about raising the shoulders. What do you think?
It's all about the shoulders. We should just do this for the rest of the programme, Rico, don't you think? No, not like that. It's up and down. Anyway.
Oh, that's wrong. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're just going to carry on. Our viewers will want to know more. But if you think you can do a better job than Rico and myself, let us know. We'd love to see your videos of what the team have just done there at the BBC Asia Network. You can tweet me at Babita BBC and the Newsday team on Twitter. That's BBC News Asia. Now, there's nothing, Rico, better than, I'm sure you'll agree, than having a book read to you at bedtime when you're a child. But what kind of stories do children actually like to hear? Well, critics around the world recently chose their top books for under 10s in a BBC Culture poll. But there has been a bit of controversy here because other than the book The Little Prince, most of the books are British and American imports. So we asked some of our correspondents with children in Singapore, Thailand and Hong Kong what they're reading them.
She's too passive. You know, wouldn't a teenager do this and do this? A Western teenager would do that, but would an Asian teenager do that? And so that might...
Carly Garmall there. Now, it was the wedding that launched Princess Diana into the global spotlight, and now some behind-the-scenes photos from the day of her wedding in 1981 are to be auctioned in America. Nicholas Witchell has been taking a look. Welcome back. You're watching BBC News. I'm Babita Sharma. Our top story. Concerned about a slowdown in the world's second biggest economy, China has ranked one of the top stories online at bbc.com for you this hour. Archaeologists say they may have found evidence that Nefertiti... All from me for now. Stay with us here on BBC News. And our top story for you here in the UK, a 21-year-old man has pleaded guilty for Asia Business Report. See you soon.
On the BBC, I'm Rico Lizon in Singapore.
I'm Babita Sharma in London. The headlines. It's 1 in the morning here in London.
8 a.m. in Singapore on Thursday, the 9th of July. Broadcasting to viewers around the world. This is Newsday.
Welcome. We begin in China, where stock markets have continued to fall despite official efforts to stem the huge losses of recent weeks. Shares listed in Shanghai and Hong Kong have fallen in value by a third in less than a month, wiping more than $3 trillion off company values.
Well, investors holding stakes of more than 5% are not allowed now to sell shares over the next 6 months, and the losses are affecting tens of millions of people. Our China editor, Carrie Gracie, reports. And a warning, there is some flash photography in Carrie's report.
Well, with troubles in China, Greece obviously still hasn't gone away. The Prime Minister of the country has made a new promise to produce what he calls credible reform proposals by Thursday. That's the final deadline set by European leaders if a new bailout package is to be agreed, saving Greece from economic collapse. Well, banks in the country will stay closed until next week. With more, here's our chief correspondent, Gavin Hewitt, from Athens. Flurry, they're reporting from outside the New York Stock Exchange. So finances in Greece, New York, China, Rico, it's all dominating the front pages this morning.
That's right. In particular, Hong Kong's South China Morning Post, the headline...
Russia has vetoed a United Nations resolution that would have condemned the Srebrenica massacre in Bosnia 20 years ago as an act of genocide. The organisation's failure to protect 8,000 Muslim men and boys under their care is considered one of the darkest moments in the UN's history. Here's the BBC's David Campanale.
And you're watching Newsday on the BBC live from Singapore and London. Still to come on the programme.
Let's just catch up with some of the other day's news for you now. The former Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi. The other story this hour is the Pope continuing his 7-day tour of South America. He's now currently in the city of La Paz in Bolivia. We can take you there live. Now, it's all about cricket here. Well, at least if you're a cricket fan in the UK, because it's begun. The first Ashes test got underway in Cardiff. England are hoping to avoid a repeat of the 5-0 whitewash, Rico, that they suffered last time the sides met in Australia. Lots of people are going to be tuned to that. What about you?
Well, you know what? Here in Asia, cricket has sometimes struggled to find an audience. There are several reasons for this. And earlier I spoke to James Dick, a sports marketing analyst in Hong Kong. And I began by asking him why it's called the Ashes Test. Why? James Dick, a sports marketing executive. Good luck to both teams. And you've been watching Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico. He's on in Singapore.
Yeah, good luck to England. They'll resume on 343 for 7. More on that coming up in sport today. And for most of our viewers, Rico's back with Asia Business Report. But from both of us, thanks for joining us. See you soon. Hello there, you're watching BBC News. I'm Babita Sharma. The headlines this hour. Lots of business news. Let's catch up with it. Here's Rico with Asia Business Report.
BBC, I'm Rico. He's on in Singapore.
I'm Babita Sharma in London. The headlines.
Seen the 300.
It's gone 1 in the morning here in London.
8 a.m. in Singapore on Tuesday, the 7th of July, broadcasting to viewers around the world. You're watching Newsday.
As the Greek government has acknowledged it has 48 hours to agree a bailout deal with international creditors or face its banks running out of cash. The European Central Bank has refused to increase emergency lending to the Greek banks.
This as the leader, Ross Atkins, has been in Athens following all the twists and turns of the day.
America will intensify its air campaign against the so-called Islamic State in Syria. That was the pledge from President Obama during a speech at the Pentagon. But he warned that the battle against IS will take time and that the US needs to have an effective partner on the ground to fight the group.
U.S. President Barack Obama. You're watching Newsday on the BBC, live from Singapore and London, so to come on the program. This is Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico. He's on in Singapore.
Babita Sharma in London. Let's bring you up to date with the headlines this hour.
Republican US presidential candidates, the outspoken reality TV. Find out a bit more about this, how they're going to get on. Laura Brickett is in Washington for us. So, Laura, lots of people talking about whether or not the other people involved in this also ahead on the programme. The 40. No other country in the world has more robots or is putting more money into robotic research than Japan. Japanese companies already employ more than 250,000 industrial robots, the most in the world. But it is Japan's rapidly aging population and shrinking workforce that is driving the development of new robotic technology. From Tokyo, here's Rupert Wingfield-Hayes. Babita Sharma in London. Before we go, just want to give you some breaking news that a powerful earthquake has shaken Chile's capital. We're getting reports that the Geological Survey is saying that the preliminary magnitude earthquake has recorded a level of 7.9. We'll keep you updated on that. Stay with us here on BBC World News. You're watching BBC World News. I'm Babita Sharma. Our top story, Hungary comes under fire for its treatment of migrants. That's all from me for now. Stay with us here on BBC World News. Now on BBC News, here's Hard Talk. Now, this week marks the 10th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, the storm which pummeled America's Gulf Coast, submerging the city of New Orleans. Power was lost and roads were impassable. And at that time, many complained that President George W. Bush wasn't doing enough to help. But one radio station became a lifeline, providing information and comfort during America's worst ever natural disaster. Our correspondent, Regina Vaidyanathan, takes up the story of the WWL radio, the lighthouse during the storm. Also coming up on the programme, the street artist that's created. Difficult to watch, isn't it? More on that online at bbc.com. Now, many Indian cities are littered with graffiti and painted adverts, but street art as a concept has never really caught on there. Well, one young designer in Mumbai has adopted the medium to try and spread a very powerful message. Jill Guradia is using Bollywood-themed street art to illustrate the many issues Indian women face, and she's been telling us about how her artwork has been received. Right. Does it make a difference then if you went to university? That we've been asking you what you think, and you've been tweeting us. Thank you very much. I'm Babita Sharma in London. Before we leave you, Rico and I would just like to show you these pictures. Hello there. You're watching BBC World News. I'm Babita Sharma. Our top story this hour, China is waiting to see if a cut in interest rates will bring an end to 2 days of market turmoil. That's all from me for now. Stay with us here on BBC World News. And a reminder of the top story here in the UK, the former Tory MP. Those are the headlines. I'll be back with more a little later, but now here's Rico with Asia Business Report.
Rules in Greece.
Yeah, that's right, Rico. The Greek Parliament has narrowly approved a public sector reform bill that will see thousands of people lose their jobs. The government needed to pass a legislation to receive the latest tranche of billions of euros in loans from its international bailout programme. Chris Morris sent this report from Athens. In India, an inquiry has been launched into the death of 22 children after they ate a school meal in the country's eastern state of Bihar. Dozens are still being treated in hospital. The state government says the oil used to cook the food was found contaminated. Doctors believe the food was contaminated with a pesticide. Villagers have demanded justice against those responsible for the tragedy. Our India correspondent Yugisa Lamai reports.
You're watching Newsday on the BBC, live from Singapore and London. Still to come on the programme. We'll find out more.
Let's catch up with some news from across the UK, and the government has shelved plans.
This is Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Babita Sharma in London. The headlines for you this hour. Scientists have developed what they call an intelligent knife, which can tell surgeons immediately whether the tissue they're cutting is cancerous. The team believe the eye knife could make cancer surgery more accurate with better outcomes for patients. Here's our medical correspondent, Fergus Walsh. It's the early hours of the morning in South Africa, which means it's now Nelson Mandela's 95th birthday. He's still... Now, forensic specialists in Romania have found the burnt remains of canvas, paints and nails in the stove of a woman whose son has been charged with breaking...
Obviously, in culture.
The royal baby is now overdue. Aside from the world's media, the Queen is also playing the waiting game. Our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell has the latest.
You've been watching Newsday from the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
I'm Babita Sharma in London. Thank you for joining us. We've got the headlines on the way for you next, and we'll see you again soon. Goodbye. Hello, you're watching BBC News with me, Babita Sharma. Let's bring you up to date with the latest headlines. Health officials are warning people to take care in the heat wave after 4 people died in separate incidents. Wednesday was officially the hottest day of the year, with temperatures above 30 Celsius in London and much of southeast England. The Met Office has upgraded its health warnings and says it expects the high temperatures to continue over the next few days. Here's our correspondent Sarah Campbell. Heathrow, one of the world's busiest airports, has presented its own expansion plans to the Commission, which is looking at airport capacity in the UK. The Mayor of London prefers plans for new or expanded airports to the east and north of London. Well, Gatwick Airport has already come up with its own plans for expansion. Now, Heathrow has unveiled 3 options for a new runway, as our transport correspondent Richard Westcott has reports. Earlier I spoke to Willie Lowry, who is from CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. He's following developments in Lac-Mégantic. Well, it could explode at any time from what we understand from the authorities, but I'm just keen to find out from you, Willie, how the rescue teams have managed to get to the victims and also perhaps conduct any kind of search for them. The words that Stephen Harper, the Prime Minister there, used looked like a war zone. Really a striking image, that. There from CBC. In other news, there's continued political wrangling in Egypt as feuding factions within the new leadership fight over the appointment of key figures. The former opposition leader, Mohammed El-Baradei, was at one stage named as caretaker prime minister, but it's now expected he will be appointed as interim vice president. This all happening whilst both supporters and opponents of deposed President Mohamed Morsi have been out on the streets again. Thousands gathered at a mosque in the east of Cairo to demand his reinstatement. Other opponents, well, there were also huge crowds in Cairo's Tahrir Square, from where the BBC's Lise Doucette reports.
Lise Doucette reporting. You're watching Newsday on the BBC, live from Singapore and London. Still to come in the programme.
Take a look at some news from the UK for you now, and there's really only one news in town. All the front pages of the UK's morning papers concentrating on one thing. Take a look at this. It is, of course, Andy.
This is Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
I'm Babita Sharma in London. The headlines for you this hour. Lindy, you there. He's the man of the moment. Well, he is if you're a tennis fan, and especially if you're British. Andy Murray. Can't believe it. Well, nowhere was Andy Murray's victory celebrated more loudly or with greater sense of pride than in Dunblane, his hometown, of course. Our Scotland correspondent James Cook was among the fans there. His report contains some flash photography. Well, after a historic victory like that, the newly crowned Wimbledon champ celebrated, of course, why wouldn't he, at the annual Wimbledon Champions Dinner. Just a warning, there is some flash photography in this as well, of course, as the world expects. There's one story dominating the front pages of Britain's newspapers. So just going to give you a flavour of some of the ones that we've got hold of in the early hours of this morning. This is the Times newspaper saying the history boy there with all the fans just, you can see him about there. There you go, the corner there. Just waiting to get a picture of him and to almost touch him as well. Most mosaic-like. The Daily Telegraph has a front page after 77 years. The wait is over. Him there holding the trophy aloft. The Independent has championed Andy Murray, the first British man to win Wimbledon since 1936. And also just want to show you this final one from The Guardian. This says it all really, doesn't it? Very simple. Front page there for them just says the champion. So congratulations to Andy Murray.
You've been watching Newsday from the BBC. Congratulations, Andy. And Rico, he's on in Singapore.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon. Hello there, you're watching BBC News with me, Babita Sharma. Our top stories this hour. First, now it's time to catch up on BBC News with the bottom line with Evan Davis. A British man has reportedly admitted killing his two young children by slitting their throats in the French city of Lyon. The 48-year-old divorcee had been locked in a bitter child custody battle. The Chief Schofield reports. Let's catch up with some news from the UK for you now, and a group of Conservative activists have urged David Cameron in London. Thank you for joining us. Let's bring you up to date with the headlines this hour. The world's biggest internet company, Yahoo, is expected to announce a deal on Monday to buy the social media website Tumblr for more than $1 billion. Michelle Fleury reporting there. Well, a former Google employee says he is providing evidence to the British tax authorities about how the internet giant avoided paying UK corporation tax by using its offices in Dublin to finance deals. Barney Jones, who worked at Google for 4 years until 2006, claims that at that time some deals were completed in Britain. Google says it can't comment on the specific allegations, but maintains it complies fully with UK tax law. It's our business correspondent, Joe Lynham. Sharma in London, thank you for joining us. That's all from me and Rico. Rico's back there with Asia's Business Report, and I'm back with the headlines. Until then, we'll see you soon. Goodbye. Hello there, you're watching BBC News with me, Babita Sharma. The latest headlines for you this hour. Now on BBC News, Nick Hine reports from the English Channel where a specialist salvage team has begun an operation to recover a German World War II bomber in the sea. Some stories from around the UK for you now, and the latest Parliament of anti-government demonstrations. Oscar Pistorius, the Olympic and Paralympic sprinter, has appeared in court in South Africa. He's accused of murdering his girlfriend, Reba Steenkamp. The magistrate postponed proceedings until August, as requested by prosecuting lawyers. The athlete who denies murder remains free on bail. Our Africa correspondent, Andy Harding, is in court. And Babita Sharma in London, thank you for joining us. We've got the headlines on the way next, and we'll see you again soon. Goodbye. Hello there, you're watching BBC News with me, Babita Sharma. The top stories this hour. The United Nations. Waiting times at accident and emergency units in England are the longest for nearly a decade, according to the latest research. In the first 3 months of this year, thousands of patients had to wait 4 hours or longer before being treated, breaking one of the government's key targets, as our health correspondent Dominic Hughes reports. The new children's laureate is Malorie Blackman, the best-selling author of the Noughts and Crosses series for teenage readers. Previous children's laureates include Michael Morpurgo, Jacqueline Wilson and Clinton Blake. The later told us that she owes her success to libraries and promised to use her new position to champion them, as our art editor Will Gromholt reports.
And welcome to Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico He's on in Singapore.
I'm Babita Sharma in London. The headlines.
Good morning in Singapore.
9 in the morning here in London. We're broadcasting to viewers around the world. Welcome to Newsday. We begin with the latest developments from Cleveland, Ohio. Kidnapping and rape charges have been filed against Ariel Castro, the man arrested after 3 women who vanished almost a decade ago were found alive at his home. His 2 brothers, who were also arrested on Tuesday, have not been charged, and prosecutors say there's no evidence they had any involvement in the crime.
Regarding this...
That's Victor Perez there, the Cleveland City prosecutor, and that police press conference actually came after 2 of the 3 young women allegedly held captive by Ariel Castro, Amanda Berry and Gina DeJesus, returned home to emotional welcomes from their friends and families. Looking back at the day's events, here's Paul Adams. Well, a short time ago, Paul Adams, with that report there, spoke with Cleveland Police Chief Michael McGrath and asked him about claims from people that their suspicions were not addressed by police.
Keep a record of...
The Cleveland Police Chief, speaking to our correspondent, Paul Adams. Now let's catch up with some of the day's other news, and after more than a quarter century, Sir Alex Ferguson, Britain's most successful football manager, is to retire. He's to step down at the end of the season, and for Manchester United fans, it marks the end of a long and successful era. Under his leadership, the team won 28 major trophies, as our sports editor David Bolton now reports. Now, there's been some extraordinary scenes taking place on Wednesday in Malaysia, Rico. Just bring us up to date on what's happened.
On the BBC, live from Singapore and London. So to come on the program, losing faith in...
Take a look at some of the stories now here in the UK, and the government has put measures to control immigration.
This is Tuesday on the BBC. I'm Rico He's on in Singapore.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Babita Sharma in London. A reminder of the headlines for you this hour. Police have arrested more than 30 people in a cross-border operation linked to one of the world's largest diamond heists at Brussels Airport. Belgian police made arrests in France, Switzerland and Belgium after a 3-month investigation. And some of the stolen gems have also been recovered. Julie Peacock has the details. At least 7 people have died and another 2 are missing after a shipping accident in the Italian port of Genoa. A large container vessel collided with a control tower, toppling it into the water. Italian prosecutors and Coast Guard officials are questioning the ship's captain. Alan Johnson has more from Rome.
You've been watching Newsday from the BBC. I'm Rico He's on in Singapore.
I'm Babita Sharma in London. Let's just bring you up to date with our main news this hour. Police in the US state of Ohio. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you again soon. Hello there, you're watching BBC News with me, Babita Sharma. The headlines for you this hour. Police in the US. The government has put measures to control immigration at the heart of its programme for the year ahead. The bill was included in the Queen's speech at the state opening of Parliament. But the speech was also notable for what wasn't mentioned, as our political editor Nick Robinson reports.
Hello and welcome to Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico He's on in Singapore.
I'm Babita Sharma in London. The headlines.
Singapore.
1 in the morning here in London. We're broadcasting to viewers around the world. Welcome to Newsday. Three women who have been found alive after vanishing almost a decade ago have been reunited with their families. The women were apparently held captive at a house in Cleveland, Ohio, and were only discovered after neighbors were alerted by one of the women's screams. Police have praised the perseverance and bravery of the women. A man and his 2 brothers have been arrested, but police say there are many unanswered questions. Paul Adams reports. Well, former police detective Carol Moore is the author of The Last Place You Look, True Stories of Missing Persons and the People Who Search for Them. She joins me now via webcam. It's a story that's something out of a horror movie, yet we hear these stories often now hitting the headlines in the world press. I mean, I'm just trying to work out from your experience as an author and a police officer investigating situations of this kind, how common is it? Davis, the situations of this kind aren't that unusual, but clearly the community in Cleveland, Ohio are quite shocked by this happening on their doorstep. Now, let's catch up with some of the day's other news. And Rico, there's been a promise of support between two important nations regarding the Korean Peninsula. Tell us more.
That's right, Babita. Yeah,
At least 3 people have died and around 10 are missing in a shipping accident in the north of Italy. The container vessel, at least 20 people have been killed after a petrol tanker exploded in the Mexican capital. The explosion on a 6...
You're watching Newsday on the BBC, live from Singapore and London. So to come on the program. In Pakistan, supporters...
The Prime Minister David Cameron says voters will be given what he calls a proper choice on EU membership early in the next Parliament through a referendum. He was reacting to comments from the former Chancellor Nigel Lawson that Britain...
This is Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
And Babita Sharma in London. Thank you for being with us. Ahead. Now, after more than 2 decades of conflict in Somalia, the British Prime Minister David Cameron has said that the country has made remarkable progress recently, but huge challenges remain. The Somalian president, though, told donors at an international conference in London that the time to help Somalia is now. Andrew Harding has this report. For the first time since the early 1970s, Queen Elizabeth is to miss a meeting of the Commonwealth heads of government. The summit is due to be held in November in Sri Lanka, a choice criticised by some human rights campaigners. Well, the Prince of Wales will attend in her place. Buckingham Palace said it was reviewing the amount of long-haul travel the Queen was undertaking. Here's Nicholas Mitchell, our royal correspondent.
You've been watching Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
And Babita Sharma in London. Before we go, just bring you a reminder of our main news lines on the way next. And Rico's back. Hello there, you're watching BBC News. My name is Babita Sharma. The headlines for you this hour. 3 American women. David Cameron says he welcomes the attention being paid to Britain's future relationship with the European Union, following remarks by the former Conservative Chancellor Lord Lawson, who said the UK should leave. The Prime Minister has pledged to renegotiate Britain's membership terms, and he's offered a referendum if he wins the next election on staying in a reformed EU or leaving. Our political editor Nick Robinson reports.